Vamos dar início, então, agora a essa nossa palestra magna, que todos vocês estão também aguardando. Vamos receber, na Conferência Internacional, ele que é um dos principais estudiosos e profissionais de arquitetura da paisagem e planejamento urbano, criado em uma comunidade rural agrícola, desenvolveu um compromisso vitalício com a sustentabilidade ecológica. Doutor em Design pela Harvard e graduado pela Universidade Florestal de Pequim, desde 1997, atua como reitor fundador da Faculdade de Arquitetura e Paisagismo da Universidade de Pequim, onde promove o urbanismo ecológico e reformula a educação em design sustentável. O Conceito de Cidades-Esponja, adotado como política nacional na China em 2013, defende soluções verdes baseadas na natureza para a gestão sustentável da água e tem alcançado influência global. Sua pesquisa sobre padrões de segurança ecológica e planejamento negativo contribuiu para políticas ambientais chinesas e vem aí repercutindo por todo o mundo. Então, ele que vai falar um pouco mais sobre toda a experiência dele com essa temática, o conceito da cidade-esponja. Convido agora ao palco o arquiteto Kongjian Yu.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. It is such a great honor. The reason for me to travel 30 hours, 3 plants, is not only because you have Oscar Mayer, my mentor, also this beautiful Amazon forest. It's a beautiful city. And certainly the birds. This morning we have beautiful imagination about birds which is going to fly. But also because I see Brazil is the last hope for the world, to fix the planet. We should I see the great potential. You have this heritage, but also we can learn from what kind of mistake we have made in other parts of the world. We have messed up the whole planet. And that's why I think Brazil is the last piece of the garden, the backyard of the God, that we have to take care of it, and we have to design it and make more beautiful and heal the planet. So the planet is in crisis. Only bold, new thinking can fix it. We need a new imagination. That's a couple months ago, you can see the world, the heat. We are rising at the historical point of global warming. And certainly together with that, we have all these crises: flood, drought, habitat loss. Here is the projection how 40% of Chinese coastal cities going to be submerged. And certainly it's an emergency. But the more crisis is that we don't have the solution. And the solution, the money, the budget, the investment, the global financial institute put is actually in the wrong direction. Here you can see $7 trillion global-wise are invested on nature negative investment every year. Harmful subsidies every year, $1.7 trillion into what we called adaptation, mitigation, great infrastructure, and only $0.2 trillion are invested on something we call nature positive. Mitigation, we invested so much money on building so-called green energy, cut carbon emission. Of course, important. But what we mean to be green is actually not necessarily sustainable. Solar panels, windmills, hydropowers, they are green, but not necessarily sustainable. Windmill kills 5 million birds every year, only in America even. And the hydropowers can destroy the whole river, a whole ecosystem. And then it's already too late to cut carbon emission, of course. Adaptation, as I mentioned, $1.3 trillion every year invested in this kind of infrastructure. Flood wall, dams, pipes, aqueduct. And they fail. They fail everywhere. They fail in Kenya last year. Fail in Brazil, you see, last year in South Brazil. You can see here. And they certainly fail also in my own country, in China, killing hundreds and thousands of people. They even kill more people than if we don't have this kind of infrastructure in some cases, because they accumulate the force of nature. The big dam, once it collapses, so have millions of people at risk. Besides carbon emission created from so-called adaptation, concrete. Concrete alone contributes 8% of carbon emission. And they are increasing because we're going to build India, we're going to build Africa, we're going to build in Brazil, which means we'll need more carbon emission. If we follow in the conventional adaptation strategies of we call the gray infrastructure, made of concrete and steels and palms and so on. So what about nature-based solution? Yes, but everything is nature. Forest, agriculture, wetland, these are all nature-based solutions. So where is the key? We only have $0.2 trillion to invest it. Where should we invest it? And also remember, carbon, beside carbon, or even more important than carbon, can be water. Water, the imbalanced cycle of water, global-wise, can be the major cause of global warming, global change. Right? Every year, we drain away the flood. We pump out the groundwater, underground water, to irrigate the farm. Global-wise, 40%, more than 40% of the sea level rising, the water in the sea, increased water in the sea, is actually come from the land itself. The depletion of groundwater. That's almost the same amount of ice cap melting. But we didn't talk too much about that. All right? Brazil, we have flood. We have flood every year. We have flood in Rio, in São Paulo, in South Brazil. But don't forget, The more serious problem could be drought. We are running out of water. Even in Amazon, we can imagine. Certainly together with this kind of water drought, we have the problem of pollution. So why and how the conventional gray infrastructure fail? Remember, when the first kind of this kind of gray infrastructure made of pumps, dikes, concrete, dams, aqueduct, when they first invented, they were invented in very mild climate. Portugal, for example, London, Paris, they have very mild climate. Right? So when climate change in European countries, in Americas, it's only a matter of comfort, actually. Not quite much compared to what's happening here, right? For other parts of the world, the majority of the developing world, we are suffering monsoon kind of climate for centuries, for thousands of years. Here you see the Bangkok, the Jakarta, Mumbai, Sao Paulo, Mexico. We have totally different kind of precipitation pattern, different kind of weather. But we are colonized by the same kind of infrastructure, which were first invented in the climatically very mild situation, right? Here in Rio, the same problem can see that's what's suffering in these countries. Because all those infrastructure fail or going to be failed, right? Because in this case, I have mentioned, when we get a flood, we drain away the flood and we lose water. The groundwater dried out. That caused sea level rising partly also. So when we drought, we pump out the water from the groundwater. And the whole earth, the whole planet, lose water. So that's why water is the key. Right? That's why I propose the idea, sponge planet, sponge city. We need to hold water, retain water, slow down water, and embrace water. Not the myopic solution to drain out water, to pump out water, right? So this is a land-based, water-driven, holistic solution for climate mitigation and climate adaptation and the recovery of a beautiful landscape for humankind, for human beings, for people. That's what we mentioned, for people. But certainly not only for people, for the whole planet. So this is a new kind of infrastructure, totally opposite to the gray infrastructure we've been inherited for 200 or even 300 years. So we need a new imagination to have a new kind of infrastructure to build our new city and recover our beautiful the garden of the gods. Across the scale, from national scale to regional scale to local scale and to the project, individual project of our urbanism, of our urban in the city. From building to the infrastructure, to the drainage, all the way to the farm, to the planet. Design and engineering. We need a new kind of civilization, which is nature-based civilization. Imagine we have very primitive agricultural civilization kind of technology, which is based on nature, but not effective. All right? We call it primitive. But we have adopted this industrial civilization based on steel and concrete and chemicals, which we now have messed up the whole world, from the climate to the pollution to the soil deterioration. So what is the new kind of civilization? What is the new kind of technology? What is the new kind of infrastructure that our cities should be built upon? This is what I called sponge city and sponge planet. Now the inspirations come from our indigenous knowledge, indigenous experience, working with the water, working with the monsoon cultures, monsoon climate. Imagine for 2,000 years, the Chinese farmers know how to cultivate this slope, the mountain slope, to catch water, to retain water for rice paddies. Or also imagine for 2,000 years, the Chinese farmers already know how to cultivate the marsh at the coast, at the delta area. The same thing here in Mexico. Right? We have people cultivating off the lake, sustainable floating gardens before Spanish took over. Now those are kind of indigenous culture adapted to local climate we should be getting inspired from. So I did a research for about 100 cities along the Yellow River Basin. Those cities survived 2,000 years of flood and drought. So that got inspirations from our today's thinking, how can make our city to be resilient. Now these are kind of resilient city which survive slow flood and drought. But certainly that's not enough. We should upgrade those, synthesize it, build a model which can be implemented for today's social society, for today's social needs, and use today's technology, such as terracing, weiring, diking and ponding, and islanding to manage water from the source to the flow to the sink. We can adapt all kinds of situations of hydrological process. Too much water? Keep it, embrace it. Too little water? Retain it. Too fast? Slow it. So, retain water, slow down water, embrace water. Three principles which are totally opposite to the conventional gray infrastructure, which is to accumulate water, to build big reservoirs, to speed up the water flows, to flood away the flood, to flush away the flood, to channelize the river, or build big dikes, flood wall to protect the water. Now those are today's principles or today's philosophies fight against water. So in opposite, we say we need to retain water whenever possible. The water fall from the sky, retain it, distribute it like a sponge. Retain water. The soil, the vegetation, the backyard, the city parks, everywhere can be like a sponge. For example, here is one example. We have built over 1,000 projects in China and in other parts of the world. I just want to give you a couple examples. So first, to retain water as much as possible. This is a tropical city in Sanya, in China, Hainan Island. We have flood and we have drought. So, but you can see that water is not greedy. Water needs only 1%. Only 1% of global service. Why are we so greedy? We should give 1% of the water. So that's the area we needed to keep. We call it acupuncture, right? Push it, put sponge to retain water, minimize the budget, reduce the infrastructure, to use nature as much as possible. By terracing, ponding, islanding, simple solution. Use one machine. You can use one machine to operate. That's 1 square kilometer in size, right in the middle of the city. That's under construction in 1 year. 3 years later, you will have a beautiful sponge landscape right in the middle of the city that can retain water and transform the barren ground, the flood-prone area, into resilient urban landscape. This was before, and that's after. That's after, you can see. The same site, minimum budget, minimum cost in 1 year, okay, in 1 year. Before and after. We solve the problem of flood. We get biodiversity come back to the city, and we create a beautiful park for the people. And solve the problem of flood and drought, and become a catalyst for urban development. You can see how much urban development have been happening here. That's become a new CBD. Nothing built there. So that's a holistic solution. Last year, we have the historical storm in the city, flooded. But the city is safe. 2 days later, you have the beautiful park, still have the park. So like a sponge. Similarly, in Thailand, right in the middle of Bangkok, we have this brown field. It's a tobacco factory, paved, polluted, lifeless. Same idea. Cut and fill. One machine. You create a beautiful urban stormwater management sponge as today. Yeah? It was executed during the COVID. Not much labor. So that's 1 year, 3 years later, you have such a beautiful living sponge right in the middle of the city. People love it. And they think it is the most beautiful park in the city. You see how many people use it every day. And it functions as a cleanser. Cleans the water. The polluted water being cleansed by this process, nature, healing the nature. Right? And biodiverse. 110 species of birds take home right in the middle of the city. And as I said, because we don't have labor during the COVID, so the army can do it. Right? Simple. Right? Very simple. The second solution, the second principle, is to slow down water flow. Imagine how much concrete we have used try to flush away flood. Right? That causes sea level rising globally. But locally, it causes drought. The groundwater drops. So here you can see, remove the concrete. Not necessary. I have to say, not all, but most of the concrete we use is unnecessary. Right? So that's the case. That's a city in China's southwest area. Polluted, canalized, flood, drought is a city of about 2 million, 1.5 million people, right in the middle of cities as a river. Canalized, concrete paved, flush away the flood. Let's try that. So instead of keep putting concrete in the river, building higher and higher dike flood walls, we remove the concrete. Rediscover the tributaries where water flow, right? Find the way water flows. Recover the natural infrastructure, the green infrastructure. Find the point where water will stay, where you can recover the habitat, the biodiversity. That was before. And that's a year later. You can see that's water being slowed down. That's today. A couple of years later, you will see all the water slow down and the pollution in the water being cleansed by the biological process. The water become crystal clean, meanwhile become a beautiful public space for people. Now these are the data you can see, how the nutrients can be removed by the natural process, how the flood can be reduced by this process. Bigger example. This is a huge river in Jiangxi province in China. Flood, ecological degradation you can see along the river, that's built. In 1 year, we built this park, right? The site was ecologically degraded, losing biodiversity. The solution, again, sponge, retain water, terracing, ponding, islanding, we create this floodable river. Retain the water, that during the flood. You can see we have the skyworks, double the space, vertical park, created all this boardwalk system after the flood. Yeah? All time, people can use it. But we share the space. We share the space with the flood, with the water. That's during the flood. After the flood. Why bother to fight against water? Right? There's no reason. Because water is not greedy. Even at the sea level, at the coast area, we say we can make friend with water. This is in Sanya again, the tropical coastal area. Sea level rising and the surge risk going to destroy the city. So people build walls like that, right? Higher and higher sea walls, strong, a lot of concrete. So we successfully convince the local decision maker to remove the seawall, actually, to let the water come in. The seawater will come in and play Tai Chi with water, not boxing against the water. So the water become friendly. The water become friendly. Slow down water flow, reduce the force of nature, and let nature to become friendly. So this is a wall. This was the wall. The city is a wall. As remove the wall, right? Water come in, slow down the water flow, reduce the force of nature, and let nature come back to the city. That's a couple years later you will see, right? People, always have people in the nature to be happy with nature. To think big. Imagine how much concrete we pour into the coastal area to build walls. Miles and miles of walls like that. This is in Haikou, a new city going to be built in China. But imagine when you build the wall, you always destroy the nature. You can see that's after the wall was built. Before the wall was built, because when you build the wall, you cut the nature's relationship. The water, process of water being cut. Right? So, and also see salination. When the surge come flip over the wall, you salinate the soil deposit. and kills the vegetation. Now that's what's happening. So instead of doing that, we built a breathing seawall. The wall can be breathing. So let water come back to the ocean, right? So this removes the top of the wall, make the wall a connector, a filtrator, instead of barrier. This is what usually happens. You're never going to fight against water. You're never going to win. Water always wins, right? So we remove the wall, we build a landscaped wall, right? Nature-based. So concrete become green and blue and permeable. Right? So that was before, and this is after, right? Horizontal wall, not vertical wall, because any wall will not be higher enough to stop the surge. The surge can be 20 meters high, 10 meters high. Are you going to build a wall like that? Impossible, right? Not sustainable either. So that's kind of the wall. It's a green infrastructure, right? Minimum use of concrete. This was a coastal line, become people-oriented recreational corridor along the coast. That was today. That's today. All the fish farm, lifeless fish farm, been transformed into sponge coastal area. Retains water. So we are talking about the whole city. So it's a green infrastructure, blue and green infrastructure, and eco-friendly. That's the city under construction. Now it's already almost built, right? Couple years. That's the seawall. Breathing sponge seawall. Now what's happening? Last year, we have this historical tropical storm that wiped out all kind of concrete wall, strong concrete wall, that's above. But our wall survived. The landscape, breathing infrastructure, ecological infrastructure survived. That's amazing. That was the real photo you can see. That was a wall we depend on concrete, totally non-resilient. And certainly I'm talking about water, about the force of water, but also we have to think systematically. It's a system. It's an ecosystem, right? So this river runs through the city. Flood, pollution, lifeless. Conventional solution is to dredging the river, build a concrete wall higher and higher. Every year we dump millions of dollars, try to fix it, but never successful. For 20 years, and no successful solution found. The solution is to get rid of this grey infrastructure. Nature-based solution. Remove the concrete, terrace in the riverbank, give space back to the water, and build a terrace to filtrate the urban runoff. The pollution can be cleansed, right? And the habitat get recovered. So that's today. That's today. Again, only need 1 year to execute. That's today. Always people. So if you have a healthy ecosystem, you have healthy people. You have happy people. Clean water. Now that's the process. Simple. Remove the concrete, give back to nature. Integrate people into nature. Live together. That's today. The concrete river become a resilient natural infrastructure. Recycles the concrete to create islands. That's the riverbank. That's a filtration system. The polluted water being filtrated. And we produce clean water. Literally sewage being filtered slowly this terraced riverbank become clean water. People love it. And this is a process. So it's a new kind of technology based on nature, based on 2,000 of experience of our human indigenous experience with monsoon flood, monsoon kind of weather. That's a test. 85% of pollutant or nutrients in the water can be removed by this process. So what about sponge Brazil? As I said, Brazil is our hope for the planet. You have so great potential here, right? That's what I talked last year in Rio to see how can be done in this beautiful country. Of course, we have this flood as everywhere. We have this terrible flood. But when you look at how the flood come, how the flood caused, it's a regional effect. So we have a local flood, we have a regional flood, we have global flood, which means sea level rising. But the city flood, regional, this river system, you can see. We needed to fix the whole drainage system, right? Upstream, right? Upstream, right? So that's a flood area of Rio. There's a river here system, you can see. So, lessons taken. We needed for an ecological security strategy at this regional scale to see where we should give water space. Where should we give water to forest? I'm not an environmentalist, total, complete environmentalist. But you have to take care of the environment, all right? To combine them together into the city. So you have a regional thinking. But also the land use. We have plenty of space. It just to use it wisely, right? Just to plan the city wisely. The problem is that we always make a mistake. We put a park in the mountain, we put a hospital in the basin. That's what happens everywhere. So when your flood comes, the hospital gets flooded. The parks, okay. So the idea is that we need to put a park in the basin, put a hospital, put the buildings on the higher floors. That's what kind of mistake can happen. So again, XL, MS, large, medium, small, to your backyard. That's a cross-sectional, scale solution. Sponge watershed. We need to manage the whole watershed. That's what I did for China in Zhengzhou, how the watershed. Minimum touch, okay? I don't mean to build a big project. But in order to fix this kind of problem, you need to do upstream solutions. So retain water upstream, 10% or 20% space to allow the water to get retained, right? So that's the solution. We can imagine how much water can be absorbed if we manage the surrounding slope. What about the process? Don't channelize it, okay? Dechannelize all the river. Give water more space. Now that's what's happening. We dechannelize the river to make water, following the water, allow water to flow freely. Right? That was before. That's after. You can do that. Landscape, right? We have beautiful profession here to work with the landscape. This was before. Concrete been washed away. Now, we imagine differently, okay? A park and slow down water flow and recover the habitat. That's only 1 year construction process, right? Integrate people. Imagine how can we, the biodiversity, the flood can come together. And certainly buildings, right? That was before. Design, and build, and construction. So, and the sponge farm, right? China and Brazil is the #1 supplier of soybeans of China, corn, but we doesn't mean that we can farm like that, right? Here you will see we just bulldozer everything to create this kind of so-called productive, but certainly not sustainable, right? Because you have no space for water. Now that's why we cause a flood downstream. The city got flooded because no sponge. We need to recover sponge farm. Not so expensive, okay? Not so expensive, because the pond can be more productive, right? The pond can be productive. Now this is what I came from. There's a sponge farm. This can be beautiful, productive farmland, sponge farmland. Now that's why I last year I visited Rio, right? Because the mayor is very friendly, very hospitable to let me to fly over the city. And I find that you have such a great potential to transform the city into a sponge city. And the whole nation become a sponge Brazil. Now that was the lake you can see, polluted, flooded, and certainly people don't like it. Now that's my imagine that this lake can be beautiful. Now that's my practice before. I'm very confident you can transform it in 1 year, right? In 1 year, not too long, right? In 1 year. As a sponge city, as I can imagine for Rio, and certainly the river. You see, the river in Rio, concrete. But you have space. You have plenty of space, right? Why don't just transform it? Simple, more beautiful, more lovely, and economically great potential. Based on my experience, if you can transform the city into landscape, sponge landscape, green infrastructure, the property value will double or triple or even quadruple. In my case, 400% increase property value. Why don't you invest it? Yeah? This was example I have mentioned. Yeah, that's 1 year. 1 year transformation needed. So that's my message. And that's my experience. I want to share with you that in order to fix the local problem, the regional problem, or even the global problem, we needed to retain water, slow down water, and embrace water, right? Across the scale. Minimum cost, very fast, and you will have holistic benefit. So that's what I want to share with you, and I really think Brazil will be the most beautiful garden of the whole world. Thank you. Thank you. Thanks. Yeah. Thank you. Thank you. Yeah. Yeah. Thanks. Thanks.